Welcome, everyone. This is a webinar from the SOLIDWORKS user group of New York City, co-hosted with Hawk Ridge Systems. And today we're going to be talking about tips and tricks. But before that, I would like to give a presentation of or introduce the community of SOLIDWORKS user group network. So the SOLIDWORKS user group network is a group that creates networking and upskilling events for users in SOLIDWORKS. And the SolidWorks user group of New York City is a chapter specifically for New York City. So we'll do online and on-site events in New York and bring up these events to the community overall. So if you would like to get involved in the group, you can connect with the community via LinkedIn. That's the SolidWorks user group network as a whole. Or you can connect with the Bevy community or the SolidWorks user group community of the New York chapter. You can scan the QR code right there in order to go to the link specifically. We're also on social media and X and Facebook and Instagram. And if you're ever interested in presenting and showing materials, you can always send me an email to New York City Solid User Group, so NYC swug@gmail.com, and I can process that request. So without further ado, I would like to introduce Patrick to continue with the event.
All right, thanks, Stephanie. So welcome in. This will be a tips and tricks presentation. I actually gave a similar presentation at SOLIDWORKS World earlier this year. So there will be hopefully some good stuff in here for any experienced users, maybe a thing or two. And if you're on the newer side, probably lots of good stuff. So I had fun putting this presentation together with a few of my colleagues, and from kind of three different heads, we came up with a bunch of things we thought might be useful to a lot of our SOLIDWORKS user group. All right, so a little bit about me. I'm out of the Mountain View, California office. I'm over in San Jose most of the time. Been at Hawk Ridge for over 12 years now. Got a mechanical engineering background, and some of the specialties on the SOLIDWORKS side. I am just SOLIDWORKS CAD, pretty much all of our simulation products and PDM. This presentation will be focused mostly on SOLIDWORKS, maybe a tip or two here or there on some of the other things, but that's a little bit about me. And then on to the presentation, just kind of five main groups with the interface, sketching, features, assemblies, and drawings. And like I said, hopefully there's a thing or two in here that you'll be able to take and use, and be a little bit more efficient with your work going forward. All right, so I'll start with the interface, and some of the stuff is new within the last couple of years, and some is just kind of tips that thought might be useful for everyone to see. So I'll start off here with just the feature manager design tree and the search bar. So in the interface, there's lots of different stuff in here that maybe we don't always notice. I pretty much have mine default settings most of the time, but some of the things I don't really use that often, but it's good to remember that they're there. So one of them is that search bar, the little filter icon. You can actually search for features or parts within your SOLIDWORKS, within the part or assembly you have open. The design library, command search as well. So search bars all over the place. You can, if you don't know exactly where you're drilling down to, or like the command search here, you can hit the S key on your keyboard. That brings up some common commands, and there's another one you can search for. Probably my favorite way to search commands, though, and by far my favorite search button is up here through search commands. So I think by default forever this was help. It might still be help, but I've switched it to commands. You can hit the little drop down at the top, switch it to search commands. I use this one all the time. If there is a button, I don't know exactly where it is, I will always go ahead and grab that. And then some of the other things that I don't always quite think about, the split tree view. So if, this one's useful if you need to see something from your regular tree, and then also maybe a configuration or something like that. I'll use this one in simulation when I need my feature tree to like hide and show bodies, but also want to see my sim tree. So that one, you just drag it down. If you don't want to see it, drag it to the top, and then it's back to kind of normal one tree view. I think the last one in here was for the display states, the right click on that little arrow there, and yeah, that'll let you show the display states just from the right click. All right, moving on to sketches, and I'll actually get into the software a little bit from time to time to show off a few things. But yeah, some of the things on here, some features I don't use, some that I just found out about making this presentation. So I'll show a few of them and go back to the agenda just so I don't skip over anything. But yeah, this first one, the enable on-screen numeric. So this would probably be best for any new users that are used to this functionality in their CAD tool. I didn't grow up using it this way, so I actually don't use this one, but it is pretty cool and probably useful to someone. So I'll pull up my SOLIDWORKS real quick and just start a brand new sketch and kind of show what a few of these sketch functions are. All right, so if kind of normal sketching along, I can do the click click method and it just makes different lines. Some other ways that maybe I even forget about, you can click and drag a line as well, and that will just do one single instance of a line and it terminates it right there. Another kind of cool line feature, you can click and when you're done drawing lines, double click and it stops doing lines for you. So those are all things that we go over in our essentials class, but good little remember. Now for the specific setting there, that one lives in our system options and sketch. And there's a few different settings I do want to highlight. So this enable on-screen numeric and then create dimension when a value is entered. For this one, if that is turned on, we can see that that kind of smart dimension box is there already. So I could, type something in, hit enter, and boom, my smart dimension's already on there. So if you prefer to do your lines that way, that's what that one is, the enable on-screen numeric. And you don't have to type it in, but it will show as you're going through. Another setting over in here, we'll go back to my sketch. And I'll just turn that one off. Preview sketch dimension when selected. So if this one gets turned on, if I have an undimensioned line, I can click on it and I see what that dimension is. And if I want to add a smart dimension, I can actually double click and type in whatever dimension I want. And then the smart dimension will go in there. So that's all great. I probably tend to just use Smart Dimension and add that in, but now you have a couple of different ways to add a dimension to all your sketches. So kind of play around with that, see which one you think works best, and kind of go from there would be my recommendation for that one. All right, and yeah, I think we hit all of those. Next, I'll move on to some parts and a handful of features within parts that maybe we aren't super familiar with. First one being the simplify. This one I frankly haven't used too often, but there is a situation where I think it can be pretty useful. So simplifying a part or like defeaturing a part if you need to send it out to someone and maybe hide certain pieces of the IP, delete some holes, fillets, certain dimensions, but you want to give them maybe an overall dimension, those kinds of things. You can, of course, just go in and manually suppress whatever features you don't want, then send out your step or whatever the file type is. With this feature, the simplify feature, you can actually go in here and basically type in some rules and kind of let SOLIDWORKS do it for you. So if you have lots of features that you're taking off, or the manual method would be pretty long, this one can have a decent benefit. And this would actually be a good way for me to practice the search command because I really don't remember where that tool lives. So maybe I'll go in and maybe we'll try this part. If I type in simplify, just start typing into the command search, into the little eyeball icon, it'll show you where it lives. And okay, it's on the analysis preparation tab, go figure. But simplify tab, and then you can basically yeah, choose some of those rules and it will start to wipe that off. And oh, my graphics are running lovely today. So maybe we'll get rid of that one. But yeah, that didn't happen in the practice. Well, in any case, that I'll move on to to a new feature there, but yeah, command search. This one by default, I think is the help. I definitely would recommend going to commands for all the stuff that we don't use that often is probably the best use of that one. Configuration tree order. This is a what's new in 2020. So this is in your configs, in your configuration tab. How are these being displayed? And I think for all time, if you don't change anything, it's just the order that you make them in, but you can reorder them or sort them now by numeric, literal, drag and drop or history based. So if you do want to redo your configs, this might save you some time from dragging them around manually, or maybe we weren't able to do that before. I can't quite remember, but yeah, that was a what's new a few years ago. And then kind of a big one. This was what's new in 2017, and they've made a few improvements to it, the 3D interconnect. So for anyone unfamiliar, this is a open with non-SOLIDWORKS file type feature. And essentially in here, we are able to open non-SOLIDWORKS files without translating them into the SOLIDWORKS file type. So pre-2017, or if you turn this feature off and try to open a step file, for example, it will try to translate it into the SOLIDWORKS kernel, into the Parasolid kernel in the SOLIDWORKS file format, and then you'll go on with your day. When this happens, it'll ask you usually two questions. Do you want to run import diagnostics, and do you want to run feature recognition? Always, always, always say yes to the import diagnostics. If there's anything wrong with any of the faces or anything in the SOLIDWORKS will try to repair it. Usually does a pretty good job. Just attempt to heal all, and hopefully you're on your way. The feature recognition, that one you can try for the simpler parts. I find it works pretty well. It basically tries to build a feature tree for you. But if it doesn't, then that's fine. You don't need that one. With 3D Interconnect, instead of translating the file to the SOLIDWORKS format, it's opening it natively. So I think DS bought like a translator company, and they just integrated this into SOLIDWORKS. So we can actually open up all of these different file types shown here without translating them. So the way that I use this tool is if I want to open up one of these files, but don't necessarily need to modify the geometry, or specifically, I want a link back to the original. And I think my next slide might have that link there. Some other CAD files. Well, in any case, if I don't want to modify them in SOLIDWORKS necessarily, maybe I want them as a placeholder, then the 3D interconnect is a pretty good one. But yeah, we can create the external file, and we can even have the link back. Now, with the step files in particular, we have a few options. So if you've never seen these are in the import options, system options, import, and when you do your file open, these ones live down at the bottom as well. So same ones, basically how you want to bring these files into SOLIDWORKS. And then with the other CAD files, this was the big feature add. If they have metadata, you can bring some of that stuff in now. So custom properties and material properties with some of these file formats. So that was the new kind of 3D interconnect tool. So yeah, leave this one on unless you are manipulating the software. If you want to break the link, if you want it fully in SOLIDWORKS, turn this option off. All right, next two tools, the intersect and the combine tool. And these are both Boolean operators. And I'll actually go over the combine first because intersect does everything combine can do. Combine does kind of a certain section of it. So this graphic's from the help file and basically shows you a visual of the combine tool. So we have two bodies where they are overlapping in some way. We are adding them together. We're merging them together. Subtract, that one does the opposite, uses one of the bodies as a cutting tool, removes that body and removes the intersecting area. And then common only keeps the intersecting area. So those are your three options with combine. With the intersect tool, we can use solids, surfaces, or planes. So those are all a fair play. And you can choose to keep stuff in the tool, or you can keep everything and just choose from the solid bodies folder later. So unless I'm specifically just combining two things, I'll usually gravitate toward the intersect tool just because it's more capable and I can do cool things like cut with a plane. So I'll show that real quick. This is one of my favorite kind of regular SOLIDWORKS tools. If I open up just any part and I just need a plane that's intersecting it, there we go. The CL plane should be fine. And I do remember where the intersect tool lives, features, and intersect. So I can pick a plane, I can pick a body, say intersect, and then this one will cut it down the middle. If I don't say merge results, I'll now have two different bodies and I can exclude them here. And what I usually do is just keep everything and then I'll now have a solid bodies folder where we can hide and show or come in here and suppress things or delete them. So anyway, that's the intersect tool. Yeah, it's very similar to combine, but a little bit more capable. All right, moving on to assemblies. So a handful of different things in assemblies, some hide and show options, some different mate options, some colored folders. So I'll get to a bunch of these in here, but I'll come back to this one so I don't skip anything. But first, I'll start with some colored folders. So we've probably all seen these before, but maybe didn't exactly know what they all mean. So found this one in the help file, the blue, the white, and the gray. The blue, if it's contents of the folder, if they're showing up in blue, means that you have things that are shown. The white one is hidden, gray one is suppressed. And if you see any of these lines or stripes, that means at least one file of each of these conditions lives in that folder. So like all three at the bottom, my folder has at least one shown, at least one hidden, and at least one suppressed component. So good one to screenshot if you're ever curious or you can't remember, but SOLIDWORKS will use this same convention on a couple of different spots. And then also there is with the mates, if you do have mate or a assembly where you have a bunch of mates in there that are broken, you can actually sort them by status, and all of your mates with errors will be grouped together. So that can be helpful for trying to hunt them down on a larger assembly and kind of troubleshoot where they live. I do have one more mate tip in here. This was 2023 What's New, and this was the repair missing mates reference. So if you just right click on a mate that is missing a reference, you see this little plus sign button. Try it, click it, and SOLIDWORKS will try to fix it for you. I think it's looking for similar faces, close by faces, things like that. Because I know if you make a change and the actual face you picked doesn't exist anymore, that's what'll blow up mates and features and whatnot. So I think they added a little bit of intelligence to try to find some of that stuff back. All right, this one's kind of cool. Something I didn't know about for the longest time, which was the displayed configuration name in the in your tree. So this one I'll actually just show in SOLIDWORKS, probably easiest way to do that. But essentially what we are doing in here is this is the default where we have our part name, then our configuration name, then our display state. So we'll see a lot of default display state one in our tree here. What if you don't use configurations? What if you don't use display states and I don't need default display state one on every single part? Well, cool thing is we can right click on the top of our tree, go to our tree display, and this one right here, component name and description. And here we can actually just choose how we want it to be listed. So we're not changing anything in the actual parts, just how they're displayed in our assembly. So component name or component description, whichever makes more sense to you. And then for secondary or tertiary, or if we want to show those at all. So for example, if I don't use display names and or display states, and I don't really use configs either very much, I can turn those off, and now my tree gets a lot simpler. So that might look cleaner on your assemblies. And there is even an option in here to just show if we are using a display state. So do not show configurations or display state name if only one exists. So like default, if that's the only one, or if you're not specifically using them, that's what that option's for. So anyway, that is can be a pretty useful one, especially if you're not using those. Clean up your tree just a little bit. Oh, some hide show options. So these are some of my favorite. I'll go back here. Um, my favorite way to hide and show is actually just with a tab on the keyboard. So this is how I'll do it most often. I'll hover over a part, click tab to bring it back, hover over that same part and shift tab will bring it back. The only trick with this one though is if I tab it and then my mouse isn't over where it lives, shift tab does nothing. So if you aren't sure, hey, where did that piece go? You can go control shift tab and hold it, and it'll temporarily show everything that was hidden. And then, shift tab to bring it back. Or you can even go in any of these, maybe a tab to hide it. You can, of course, find it in the tree, right click, show. So that works too. The cool thing, I think this was a What's New 2024 SP2 I had written down. So let's say I hide a bunch of things in here. We can actually just go to the top of our tree and say show, and it'll show all. So that's another good way to do it. You can hide all in your tree. I'm not sure why you do that, but you can show all as well and just do that straight from your tree. So that's a pretty good one. But yeah, my favorite is the tab to hide, shift tab to bring back, or the control shift tab and hold to temporarily show all of your hidden components. All right, this was a big one. Save as previous release. This is for assemblies and for parts, something I didn't think SOLIDWORKS would do. We're probably all aware that forever SOLIDWORKS was you had to be on the same version or newer to open up a given SOLIDWORKS file. Not necessarily the case anymore because we can back save at least a little bit. So this, I believe, started in 2024, if I recall, and you can save back up to 2 years. So 2024 version can save in 2023 or in 2022. And it opens up like a full 2022 or 2023 model. We had kind of limited ability to open a future version before. It was usually the 2025 or the SP5 release. So like SOLIDWORKS 2022 SP5 could usually open up the 2023 version, but it would say future version in the little box at the top left. It's kind of like a dumb solid icon. But this one actually is saving back with the feature tree. So we're allowing a little bit more flexibility between the years. As of the last time I tested this, this did not work for simulation and flow simulation. So if you do have those studies, you'll be able to have the CAD go backwards, but not the sim setup. I'm not sure if they've changed that since then, but that was the last and only issue I had encountered with this particular one. But yeah, pretty cool. If you have like a vendor or something on an older SOLIDWORKS, you can still collaborate a little bit better than before. If you have someone working even older or you don't want to use this feature for whatever reason, if you're going SOLIDWORKS to SOLIDWORKS, I would recommend saving as a parasolid. Basically just strips out your feature tree, but all the solid info, all the solid data gets transferred over. Reason being, Parasolid is the kernel that the SOLIDWORKS files run on, so it doesn't have to do any translating. So that's really the best one for SOLIDWORKS, but going to outside of SOLIDWORKS, you can use all the regular ones, Parasolid, Step, Aegis, they all work fine. All right, and then exporting assemblies as step files. This is in our system options and export, and basically allowing us, it's really small in there, but export assembly components as separate step files. So this would be if you wanted every component to be sent out as a step. I think before you'd have to do that individually, just file, save each one as step. Or maybe if you had PDM, you could run a task or something to do that. But now we can just go to one assembly and spit out all the components as steps. So if you're saving a bunch of steps, this one can definitely be a good time saver. And then we have some more step import options that we didn't have before. So basically trying to tell SOLIDWORKS how we want to handle assembly steps that are coming in. And automatically run import diagnostic. I would definitely recommend that one. Like I said, always, always, always say yes on the import diagnostics. Last thing you want is a file with some errors, and then you build a bunch of features on top, and then it inexplicably won't rebuild down the line. So right when you import anything in the SOLIDWORKS, make sure it's a nice clean geometry. And then filtering the assembly step files on imports, we get this nice little interface, and I suppose you can try to figure out which ones you want to keep and which ones you don't. So if you're into the importing of steps, you have a few more options now. This one's kind of cool, a fix or float of initial component. So for anyone unfamiliar, when you bring a file into SOLIDWORKS into an assembly, the very first one you bring in, the default is that is your fixed component, meaning it is locked in space. You can't drag it around, and then you'll mate all your components off of that one, generally speaking. And this is still kind of the best practice. If you have some sort of a base or central or main part inside of your assembly, you'll find that first. You can click your green check and it will line up all of your planes in origin with the assembly planes in origin. That's my favorite way to start a component. Just click it, then green check, as opposed to dragging it or clicking onto the screen, just so we get those origins lined up. But let's say you made a mistake or you grabbed a wheel first and you had the frame second, and I don't want that wheel fixed. You could always go outside of this tool, right click on that wheel and go float, and then bring your base in and go fixed. What this one allows, though, if you know you're kind of doing these out of order, you can have your first component be floated if you want to. So before, no matter what, it was fixed. This one, you can float that first component or only fix the first component. That's the default behavior. So anyway, a little bit more flexibility now bringing those in, but probably most of the time, I would imagine this probably isn't a big deal because probably most of the time we'll bring in that kind of big main component first anyway. But yeah, now if you don't like that workflow, you have the ability to change it. And then new subassembly, you can have a couple more options for selecting the origin. So that's going to be within your SOLIDWORKS assembly, create new assembly, new subassembly. And I think before it was wherever you clicked, I believe was where it would go. So now we have a couple of more options for that one. All right, on to drawings, and then we should have some time for some questions if anyone has them. So move right along here. A couple of different things near the align toolbar for aligning mates, some auto balloon, an auto balloon feature with a quantity, filtering our bomb, so actually the ability to sort and even hide certain components. We have some dimension favorites, detailing modes, external reference settings. This is kind of a cool one. The image quality, that's not just for drawings, that's for anything, one of my favorite settings. And then the link to property. So if you're doing any work on the title block, that's where that one will be useful for. So I'll show a few of these, but yeah, the align toolbar, there's always a couple of different ways to line up your dimensions. Probably my favorite way is right when I bring them in, those little orange and blue paddles to kind of give it a default distance is a really good way to start. But if you didn't or you bumped it or whatever, the align toolbar gives you a bunch of different tools. And usually when you click on a dimension, you'll get this little one here. That's the auto arrange dimension button, and it'll try to get everything kind of the same size away, same distance away from your part. So play around with those if you're doing kind of any drawing detailing and you need some help with where the dimensions drop. That these tools can be helpful there. The auto balloon quantity, I guess I would have just assumed this existed, but I guess it didn't until 2023, where next to our balloons, we can say what those quantities are. So it's just a little checkbox that got added to the balloon feature, and we can choose the placement on that and X, or I think there's whatever letter we want to put next to it for our quantity. But yeah, I guess this would be useful for things that aren't so obvious, like clearly there's 4 props here, but maybe some other thing that I'm only ballooning once. Maybe I do want to represent that more than one of them are showing up. So anyway, guess what's new 2023. We have this filter bomb. So kind of just like you would filter really any sort of a list or table, we can do that in the bill of materials now. So maybe for a smaller view, a section view, a detail view perhaps, or if you have a page where you only wanted to show steel parts, you can have the same bomb, but just filter it instead and kind of reuse what you already have in there. So anyway, the little drop down arrow right next to your bill of materials, that's where you can find whatever you want to filter by. All right, warning messages. So this isn't necessarily just for drawings, but there is one particular drawing one I do want to point out. But just in general, if you ever see in SOLIDWORKS the option for don't show again, you click that, click OK, whatever that warning is. These actually go and live in your system options, and then messages, errors, warnings, and then the newer versions have the subsection dismissed messages. So this is where they will go to live until you turn them back on or until you reset your settings. You can reset your settings, either all of your settings or a particular page, or click certain ones and go forward. But yeah, that's about it for kind of these warning messages. The one specific one I wanted to go over, I couldn't quite find the exact screenshot of it, but I do remember there was one particular message that would pop up in SOLIDWORKS. I think it still does, that asks you in a drawing, your model has changed. Do you want to rebuild your drawing? Or your drawing views are out of date. Do you want to rebuild your drawing? The correct answer is yes, first of all, but you could say no to that one. And I remember a SOLIDWORKS guy that gave a presentation a long time ago was pushing the development team. If you hit no to let the user know you have chosen wrong, please try again, because yeah, why would you want your drawing to be out of date? So anyway, and I think that one you could dismiss as well, at least at one point. So point being, be careful with your dismissed messages. If you do by accident, you can restore them down here in your system options and the messages, errors, warnings. But yeah, I certainly don't show again with some of these things. Do you want to open this or do you want to rebuild that? So anyway, that's where these ones live. Another big one of my favorite settings, and all of my PDM users should be using this one, that is up here. Don't prompt to save read-only reference documents, discard changes. So what does this one mean? When this setting is off, if you are opening up a file that has any read-only references, so that's an assembly with subcomponents or a part that has external references on it, if any of those are read-only and you make any change, even just a rebuild and save, it will ask you, do you want to save this part? Do you want to save this part? And it'll go through all of them. So you can imagine if you have tens or hundreds or even more parts, it takes a while to click through all of those. So all of my PDM users, I will say to definitely turn this one on. So if you're working with anything that's read-only, so usually you'll check out a part or two that you do want to modify. Everything else you want to not change. And even if you're not using PDM, if you have any read-only files, this option's a must. So you're not overwriting read-only stuff. So yeah, turning this on does not prompt to save the read-only. It just ignores them from the save operation. This other one is a good one to be aware of as well. This load reference documents. I think prompt or is probably the default on this one, but I usually switch it to none. So what does this one do? If you have a reference document that if you open up your assembly, it will try to open other reference documents. So like your subcomponents or in the external reference example, whatever is the external reference for the part you're using. So unless you're doing like master modeling and you always have a few parts that you need open for proper rebuilds, I would say none on this one. Changed only can be nice if you want to see pop up in your face whatever did change on that assembly. However, I usually like to just open what I want to open and not have SOLIDWORKS open a bunch of stuff for me. As you can imagine on a larger file, if a bunch of things change, it's going to take a while to open that up, and how are you even going to work with tens of files open at the same time anyway? So definitely recommend none on this one. And that's also in the system options. System options, external references. Okay, and my absolute favorite setting and number one setting for fixing slow files or assemblies is going to be the image quality. So I was on tech support for a while, and I would every once in a while get a file. Hey, my file's running slow. This is one of the first things that I would check. So this is actually just a graphics option, and it's in the document properties, meaning that you could have a different setting for every file for this one. And you can even set this in your template so all your new files will obey the same rules. But all this option is doing is making your circles look less like hexagons and pentagons the farther you go to the right. So I'm going to fire this up in SOLIDWORKS and just kind of show you what I mean. And yeah, this plate is probably a good one to show because it does have some circles in it. But yeah, this is a graphics only option. Control 8, your normal 2 shortcut on your keyboard. Definitely one I always remember. But yeah, let's go over to our image quality here. So I've got my options and then doc props and image quality about halfway down. And so right now, this one's about halfway. I usually recommend about the left third on here. It usually gives us close enough to a circle without, getting too intense with the settings. But let's go to the extreme. I can see my little window changes. And the more I go to the right, the more edges it has to my circle, essentially. Purely a graphics option. But yeah, if I go all the way to the left, my kind of sample circle looks pretty terrible. And then if I zoom in on any of these circles look pretty terrible too. So yeah, like a hexagon, I think. How many sides is that? Maybe it's a few more. Can't count that high today, but these are still circles. I should be able to still find an edge, even though it's very jagged. So what happens if I crank my image quality up? We just get more edges in the representation is all. So left third is kind of the sweet spot for me, at least. If I am kind of zoomed out a normal amount, it still looks like a circle. If I zoom way in on the left third, I can still see kind of the edges, the facets of that circle. So if I need like a zoomed in screenshot, maybe I'll crank this up a little bit. But yeah, I don't like having it all the way to the left. It looks terrible. All the way to the right looks the best, but it uses the most graphics resources, and my laptop's not that good. So I would definitely not recommend over here. And it has a little red and a little warning about increasing the file kind of performance there. So yeah, left third, kind of figure out your sweet spot for that one. There are 2 slider bars here, so it's worth mentioning the top slider is for your shaded modes. So shaded with edges and just shaded. The bottom slider is for your wireframe modes. Your wireframe, hidden lines removed, hidden lines visible. So exact same options on here. The only thing I'll say to watch out for on that bottom slider, I have seen just once before in my tech support days where I had a drawing that had a whole bunch of lines in it. And if this was too far to the left, it would actually delete some of the lines from the drawing view, so from the representation. So if you have anything with a ton of lines in it, just check, make sure that they're all showing up. And if they don't, just make sure it's not all the way down. But yeah, same thing with this one. I would not want it to go all the way up. Your drawings will take a long time to load if this is too high. So anyway, that is our image quality. Definitely my favorite option for graphics. And yeah, if you have anything running slowly, that's the first thing I always check. Really simple solution. If someone cranked it up to get a better screenshot, forgot to turn it down, just crank it back down and everything will load a little faster. If you have a really good graphics card, then maybe it doesn't matter as much for you, but for kind of all of our normal machines, yeah, live somewhere in the left third would be my strong recommendation for that one. All right, and a couple of drawing properties here. So this link to property, mostly this is going to be working with your title block. It doesn't have to be the title block though, but if we are working in that, that's usually your right click and edit sheet format. And then all these options down here, all these notes are text boxes, are notes essentially. So the best way to link these would be inside of your note, inside of the actual text where you could go and type in whatever you want. Instead of typing anything in, and that's this little option here, the link to property. And then that brings up this box over on the right side where we can have two options here, current document or model found here. And then we can choose what property we want. So we'll just quickly go over what these ones do. Current document, you'll use this if you want a drawing property. So that'll be properties and the drawings custom properties. If we want it linked to the model that we're using, that is where model found here is. And then this one here, drawing view specified in sheet properties. This is the default, and this is by default the very first part or assembly you drag into a drawing view. That is going to be the one specified in sheet properties unless you specifically go and change it. So usually in drawings, probably most of the time we're using one part or one assembly per drawing. Would not recommend having a drawing with my top level and all the same parts in the same drawing. That document will take way too long to run if it's of any sort of size. But yeah, model found here, drawing view specified in sheet properties. So that's my part or my subassembly. And it'll be the custom properties from that part or from that subassembly that we are choosing from. And we pick that in our property name dropdown, and it will drop in whatever that property is. So two options here are drawing at the top for current document or model found here is that part or that subassembly. Now, two different syntaxes to just be on the lookout for. Don't have to memorize these, but the PRP sheet, this is that sheet properties property. So that's your part or your assembly. So drawing view specified in sheet properties gets the PRP sheet tag. So that's your part or your assembly where we're pulling those custom properties from. The other one is for the drawing, this $ PRP. So that is your drawing custom properties. So those are the two ones. I always thought this was counterintuitive. So the way I remember it, PRP sheet properties is where that one is. And I know drawing view specified in sheet properties is talking about my part or my assembly. And then you probably have some text on your drawing blocks already, on your title blocks already. A couple of different ways to see kind of where those come from. You can hover over them when you're editing your sheet, and when you're editing your sheet format, and it should show what that syntax is. Or you can do a right-click, edit text in window, and then that one will also show. It'll give you a window with the syntax in it, and you could modify that manually. Pro tip for really anything SOLIDWORKS, if there is a way to click through or go from a drop down to put some sort of property or operator on, do it that way so you spell it correctly every time. I know I've tried to type things in and it just shows the thing I typed instead of converting to the material I wanted or whatever it was. So yeah, if you miss a space or a quotation or something, it just uses static text. So pick your drop downs whenever you can here or in equations or wherever you're using in SOLIDWORKS. If they've got a list for you to pick from, do that. It'll be the perfect syntax every time. All right, and last one, this is a relic from the old SOLIDWORKS Explorer. So if anyone's been using SOLIDWORKS for a while, without PDM, the SOLIDWORKS Explorer was the go-to for renames and moves, so it would redo your references. So if anyone's not using PDM and you rename a file or you move it to a different folder and you just do that in regular old Explorer, it will break whatever references you have. The reason for it is it's a function of the SOLIDWORKS search routine. If you open up an assembly and you have some subcomponents in there, SOLIDWORKS will try to look for, let's say it's bracket one that is one of my components. It's going to look for bracket one open in memory. So if it's already open in my SOLIDWORKS screen, then it'll look for bracket one in the reference documents folder in my system options. Then it'll look for it's like last saved, last opened, and a couple of others. And it'll just go through that list. And if it can't find it, then you get that message of, hey, where is this component? Do you want to find it for me? To avoid that, we would go through the SOLIDWORKS Explorer, do a SOLIDWORKS rename, and then that would look for the references and fix them for you right there. Or a SOLIDWORKS move where same thing, you move the file, it goes through your references and it updates that location. So Explorer, they got rid of that a few years ago, but now, and they've had this one actually in the right-click menu for a while, but now this is the only way to get to these options that I'm aware of. So this is just regular old Explorer. You can right-click on your SOLIDWORKS document. There should be a SOLIDWORKS option in your right-click menu, and then you can get all of these functions, your rename, move, pack and go. So yeah, you can even pack and go without opening SOLIDWORKS. I'd probably recommend opening SOLIDWORKS first in case there's a rebuild that needs to happen or any files it can't find or whatever. But yeah, you can do that just straight through Explorer. So kind of cool to know. Any of my PDM users, you probably never have to use this because all the renames and moves redo the references for you once everything's been checked in. So this is more for my non-PDM users or anyone working outside of the vault. Do all your renames and moves through right click, then SOLIDWORKS, and then do it that way if you have any references you want to preserve. All right, that's it. Going for a little while here. Hopefully that was some good info for you all. And we do have some time for some questions. So if anyone does have a question, I see the chat was a little active. Didn't see anything while I was going there, but yeah, we'll answer whatever questions you got in here.
Yeah, so it seems like David had a question. So he asked, what suggestions would you give to prepare for the CSWE S certification?
Ah, yes, CSWE simulation. That one was a tough one. I think I had to take it a couple of times. But yeah, which ones to prepare for? So, if I recall, there's a few different study types. For sure, the static study was on there. I believe there was a thermal and a nonlinear as well. So, if you've taken those classes or if you have used those modules and are pretty comfortable with them, that's definitely a place to start. I don't believe that one has a practice exam, so it is kind of tough to prepare for some of them, and depending on how the questions are written, sometimes they can be tough with a few of these SOLIDWORKS exams. But yeah, definitely there you have to take a few of the other sim certs beforehand anyway, so that is good preparation. So if you're ready to take the E, you've already taken and passed a few sim exams, so that's good preparation for sure. But yeah, a couple of the SOLIDWORKS sim classes, and I'm trying to think if there are any kind of exam prep docs for that. I don't think so. Yeah, that one is kind of hopefully you're pretty familiar with it. Pay attention to detail on materials, and it doesn't have you do anything crazy hard. Like probably the hardest thing in a nonlinear study is some of the different solver settings when you don't get convergence. You don't have anything like that in the exam. So yeah, the certs before are good preparation, and yeah, using the software and just taking other certs, you kind of know the cadence of how they ask the questions, attention to detail. I believe this one does have some multiple choice stuff too, so have the knowledge base open for sure. And these days, sometimes it's faster to do a Google search and to find some of these different answers. But yeah, definitely have the knowledge base open. Have the help file open, maybe in another tab. And yeah, good luck with the cert.
There's also a question from Ahmed. He asked, and maybe I'm not sure if this is you can answer this, but he's asked if what's the most stable version of SOLIDWORKS for a 16 gigabyte of RAM laptop?
Um, probably. Oh, that's enough where SOLIDWORKS it's above the minimum requirements. I think the minimum requirements were 8 gigs forever, and they might have even bumped it up to 6. But the later the service pack number, generally, the more stable the version. So with in almost all cases, SP5 of whichever year you're on is going to be better than 4, 3, 2, 1, and 0. If you ever see a point 1 or point 2 in the service pack release, something big happened in the previous one, so don't use those service packs. But yeah, go to SP5, 2024 SP5. Right now we're 2025 SP3. I might even have 16 gigs of RAM on mine, but that's plenty for normal SOLIDWORKS operations. You really only need a lot more RAM if you're doing kind of big simulations or big renders. So kind of all normal SOLIDWORKS operations, that's plenty. We shouldn't have to worry about kind of which version for which one to use.
Okay, great. Thanks. There's also another question from David. He asked how can he create a line as per the ISO 128-24 of 2014 version. This is a long dash dotted line used for positioning to position cutting planes.
Oh, we're talking about in a drawing?
Yeah, in the drawings. I guess it's like customizing the lines specifically.
Yes. Let's see if I remember how to do that. Sure. Oh, good. I do have a drawing for this thing. So I guess we can do this with any line. Just change the format of it would be kind of the quick and dirty way. You can do a section view too and tell the line style to move or to be whatever you want. But in here, I probably just want to pick frankly, the layer of line. If we're doing it manually, uh, choose my layer and then just change what my line format looks like. Here, pull up my layers toolbar. And with this one, if anyone's never seen this before with the layers, you can have different colors, different line styles, different line thicknesses. And this can be really helpful if you do have specific things you want to do that's kind of different from the norm. So if I open up this one, I should be able to pick any style and any thickness I want. So hopefully the one you're looking for is one of these in here. But you could basically, if I wanted to do, should even be able to make a new one in here. So I'll call this one test, pick a new style. Maybe I'll do this dashed one and I'll leave that thickness. So on my test layer now, I should be able to pick my line and change the layer. So now it should match whatever one I chose. So that's your manual way of changing any line, any edge in your SOLIDWORKS drawing. And then like specifically for a section view, there's a default to that, but I think you can change any of those as well. See if I can just slice this real quick. So yeah, that one has its own kind of line style. And can't remember if it lets me change it in these properties. It might be in the doc props for my style. Area hatch fill. I guess that would be for the section itself. And if you've never seen this before, lots of different settings. Most of these are linked to a particular standard, so probably most of the time you don't need to change these. But yeah, like dimensions and what the standards are. These are all in the doc props in your units. But yeah, annotations would probably be where we would want to change something like that. But yeah, for changing individual lines, individual edges, I would use layers and just choose whatever line style you want. So hopefully that's helpful.
Okay, great. I think that covers it.
All right, excellent. Thank you all for attending. I think this is being recorded as well.
Yeah, this has been recorded. From our part, we will release the communication or the recording later, so if you can have access to it, it's going to be a YouTube link. Yeah, it will be following up after the event. Awesome. Well, thank you so much, everyone, for joining us. Thank you, Patrick, for this presentation. It was, at least for me, it was very insightful to go over all of these tips and tricks. For me, the one I'm taking away is the warning on the drawing updates. I thought that was very interesting because I mean, working in PDM, I can see how that might not be something that you want to do. It's like there's something sometimes you're like working specifically in an assembly, you don't necessarily want to update the assembly going up to the top, which could have its problems per se, but yeah, I think it's open for discussion for sure.
Sure.
But thank you so much. This was super fun and insightful. So I appreciate your time and I appreciate everyone for joining us.
Take care, everyone.